Hello and welcome to the Football 365 show. This is Big Weekend, brought to you by Paddy Power. I'm your host, Mark Smith, as the little caption will say below. Oh, not bad timing. Welcome to the show. This, I think, will be the final show of the Premier League season. Lots to talk about. I mean, we're going to have to manufacture some sort of drama, aren't we? Because there's not much going on in the league, but still the chase for fourth place is still on. The chase for European football, it's all going on still, really. So, yeah, we'll get into that. We'll get into Ruben Diaz, the new Football Writers Player of the Season. We'll talk about Roy Hodgson. He's on his way out. The father figure of the league is going. Yeah, I mean, lots to talk about, really, I think. We'll go through most of the games. If you like it, by the way, you can comment, talk to us throughout it. I think if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, you can comment and get in touch with us that way. It'll be me, Mark Smith, as it says, and it will be Sarah Winterburn, as ever, editor-in-chief of Football365.com. This is Big Weekend, brought to you by Paddy Power. Winty, for the final time, you're here.
Hello, Smithy. Should we? Yeah, no.
Whatever you like, really. Whatever you like. Yeah, no, it's
lovely, Mark. Lovely, Mark.
Look, lovely, Mark's fine. It's the last one. It's the last one of the season, Sarah. Just give me a quick few sentences on how you felt about this season generally. A broad review of this season. How do you think it's gone? Not for the show, for the season of football.
The same word for both. Surreal. I think it's been the bizarrest season, hasn't it? It's been I think if we look back, the quality's probably not been quite there, understandably. No crowds, players very tired, bizarre scheduling. I think we've made the best of it. I think that's, we'll look back with not a great deal of affection for this season, I don't think. We never thought we would get a whole season without crowds or 98% of it, which has been. Yeah, so it's been a bizarre season, but I've enjoyed parts of it. And actually, some parts of it, I've kind of got used to that sort of, the quietness of it almost. And that's become a little bit the norm. But we've seen this week how it's
sad, isn't it?
Yeah, but when we see this week, didn't we? We really appreciate it, though, Oh, if I wanker up. Oh, it's brilliant. It's really call him a wanker.
Yeah, football's back. Nature is healing. But yeah, I think.
But it's been interesting that it hasn't been massive. It hasn't been so predictable as it. We all thought Liverpool would walk it, or would certainly be second. For them to drop off, I think that's been fascinating. And then this sort of chase to get back into it. We've obviously had, your lovely West Ham. We've had your lovely Jack Grealish.
Let's not get started on that. Come on.
So
yeah, there's been some
moments,
outstanding things. Yeah. There's been some really, really great sort of threads throughout the season. But I mean, ultimately, as Miguel Delaney mentioned today from The Independent, the four richest clubs have again finished in those top four places.
Well, maybe not yet. Maybe not.
Yeah, it looks
they're
like
there as it stands. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll get into those games specifically later on. But it's. I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not a season we'll be looking back on particularly fondly, I don't think, in a few years, just given the sort of the national conscience of it all, the feeling of I guess just missing football as it should be. And I think that's something next season we can rectify and have a good old knees up at the footy. But this weekend, Sarah Winterburn, it is the last day of the season. Talk to me about the games that interest you here. Should we start with Leicester Spurs? Because Leicester could still do the same thing they did last season, which is, drop out. And we said a couple of months ago, this isn't going to happen for Leicester this season. They're going to be too strong. They're going to be too good. They're not going to fall out that top four. And now look where we are.
You might have said that, Mark. A while ago,
Yeah,
I drew attention to the running. Leicester's running always looked really scary. We looked at this 10, 12 games ago, and they had one of the, if not the worst, one of the worst run-ins in the entire Premier League. And considering what we saw from them last season, they dropped out at the end. And considering also they've had a raft of injuries, they're still in there. I think it was too easy to think on Tuesday, oh, well, they've lost to Chelsea. That's a massive blow. Now, they didn't really turn up in that game. They absolutely didn't. And if they do that again on Sunday, they're in trouble. But Tottenham aren't Chelsea. And certainly, we saw from Tottenham.
Are they in trouble if they don't turn up? I don't know.
I think they are. I think they are in trouble. I think this Tottenham side is anything but predictable at the moment. They performed the way they performed against Aston Villa was ridiculous. It was terrible, or not, an awful performance
from obviously minute 10 onwards.
Yeah, and obviously they had that cloud over them, didn't they, with the Harry Kane stuff? And they were at home, and the fans weren't happy. in some ways it might be easier for them to go to Leicester and play a little bit better than it was to play in London on Wednesday days. I know there are days
midweek. Let's just go with midweek.
But this is still really close, because Leicester can only do what they can do. But I know that sounds obvious, and I do think Liverpool will beat Palace. I think it's very tempting, isn't it? The narrative of Roy Hodgson going back to Anfield, Christian Benteke, who is in incredible form at the moment.
Oh, we're going to get into that later. Don't tread on that. Don't tread on that. I've got my little graphics and everything.
I do think Liverpool at the moment. I think that moment, the Alisson header, that's the one that we're going to remember, isn't it, from this season? If we take anything from this season, it will be that moment as defining the season for Liverpool. And the minute that went in, you thought, well, they're going to do it. They're going to, fulfill their end of the bargain. And there was no doubt about it from there. And they did a very professional job against Burnley. And I suspect they'll do the same against Palace. The question is Chelsea. I think, they've probably got the most difficult game of the three, to go to Villa. Villa had fans in there. They don't want, they were quite good in midweek. Jack Grealish was excellent against Spurs. This is not easy. This is not an easy game at all. And I think they've got to go into that thinking, A, Liverpool are going to win, and B, Leicester are going to win, because they're both going to go into their games as favourites. Chelsea.
So you're telling me then that something interesting could happen on this last day of the season. It could be an absolute worldie, one for the ages.
Oh yeah, I'm actually utterly confused with your idea that we're going to have to manufacture some kind of drama, because absolutely, we obviously know who's going down. That's done. We know who's the champions. We know who's finishing second. What we don't know is we've got three teams within 1 point of each other trying to get those two remaining Champions League places. And then we've got the Europa League fight below that, the fight to finish sixth to go in the Europa League, but not seventh, crucially, to go in the conference. So we're going to see some curious happenings, I think, on Sunday, when people realise they might finish in seventh and sort of, we just drop a point?
Finish ninth instead? Yeah,
anything but seventh.
But with Leicester Spurs specifically, Sarah, we haven't really talked about. We haven't had the show since Leicester won the FA Cup last weekend. So I mean, talk to me about Leicester in that FA Cup final and what that means, not only for them and for clubs of that similar sort of size, the dreams they can have going forward, but also about would they have sacrificed that FA Cup win for a top four position?
It depends who you're asking. I think the players wouldn't. I think the players would have liked the FA Cup. I think if you asked anyone,
Maddison said it was the greatest day of his life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those players, especially those players who didn't win the Premier League. Maybe Jamie Vardy might feel differently. Maybe Wes Morgan, Mark Alban might feel differently. They've already achieved something even greater. But if you're James Maddison or one of those other players who's looking at their first piece of silverware, I think there's no doubt they wouldn't switch it in a million years. As much as they want to get in the Champions League, you don't get a medal for that. And as a footballer, they do cherish that far more. But if you ask the Leicester owners, I'm sure they would rather be fourth or third and get in the Champions League. I think Brendan Rodgers would probably be aye about it. I don't know. He'd probably tell you he wanted both and say something really cryptic, and we'd walk away not knowing quite what he meant. But I think they produced the best version of Leicester in that FA Cup final, and they were helped that Chelsea. Thomas Tuchel wasn't wrong in that they hadn't played badly. They just. Again, we keep seeing from this Chelsea side, scoring goals is a problem. And even on Tuesday, they were so dominant. And I mean, I watched that game. I was writing about that game, and Leicester barely got anywhere in Chelsea's half. Never mind had a chance. They were so passive, so tired, so flat. For this game, which was massive. Whether it was just being tired from Saturday, whether it was a virtual or a literal hangover. I don't know, but they didn't turn up for that game.
But they must have felt like, having kept a clean sheet against Chelsea, and Chelsea having those chances in the cup final, and then those chances and those goals disallowed in that first half of the league game, you just felt like this same thing's going to happen here, isn't it? Leicester are going to sneak one. It's going to happen. So, in terms of the mental fortitude, I think of the Chelsea players, because they're thinking the same thing, the fortitude of them to come back and actually get that win convincingly in the end, really. I mean, I know there's a late wobble, but I thought that was really impressive from Chelsea.
But even the wobble wasn't a wobble in the way that we've seen. We saw from Frank Lampard's Chelsea, sometimes when they conceded one goal, they looked like another one was on its way because they didn't have that discipline underpinning it. Whereas Chelsea it was almost like there wasn't a panic. There wasn't a let's throw everything at the ball. Let's just try and defend on the edge of our box. It was let's keep doing what we're doing. Let's keep doing what we're doing. And Leicester never really looked like equalising.
Apart from the Perez one towards the end.
Yeah, it probably fell to the wrong player, that, didn't it? But Chelsea, I sort of thought they were always going to do it on Tuesday. There was a real belief about them, which was amazing, really, considering what had happened on Saturday. You could have forgiven them for being a little bit vulnerable, couldn't you, or fragile after that game. But it did feel like they absolutely knew they were going to win that game, that the chances would keep coming. And I thought Timo Werner on the night was phenomenal. Now, he hasn't scored the goals that he's supposed to have scored for Chelsea.
He runs the channels, Sarah. He runs the channels. As told.
We've always used that as a little bit of a stick to beat strikers within the past, haven't we? That he's not scoring goals, but he's running the channels. But actually, the effort he put in, and he should have had a penalty before he had the penalty. That was blatantly a penalty. Yes, he was offside for it, but he kept making those runs, and he worked so hard. He was closing down like you wouldn't believe.
And there was a real turn. The tide will turn for him, surely.
He's not a terrible player by any stretch of the imagination.
Not at all.
And we mustn't get away from the fact that these players who came last summer, they've not been able to go home and see their families every other weekend or whatever as players in the past would do. Usually if you come from Germany to the Premier League, every time you get 2 or 3 days off, you'll be off home to see your parents or your girlfriend or your friends or whatever. And these are still young men. You're talking about Timo Werner, Kai Havertz. They're in their early 20s. It's really, I don't think we should underestimate how difficult it is to go to a different place.
This is why I don't dump on them when this is why I'm not doing it this season. It's first season away from your family. Next season, knives are out. Knives are absolutely out for Werner.
Absolutely.
I think he'll be scoring 15, 20 goals next season.
Yeah.
You can take that to the bank.
If not more. But I think Chelsea have got a massive task, I think, on Sunday. That Villa game could be very, very nervous indeed.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's impossible at the minute to talk about Spurs without talking about Harry Kane. We're going to have some obligatory Harry Kane chat now. We have an allotted few minutes for this. Sorry, but we've got to talk about it. If we didn't talk about this, people would think we're mental. So we've got to talk about it. It's the
story of the week. It's been dominating the narrative of the week since Monday night when this first broke, hasn't it? We've talked about it all week on site. It's very funny, Harry Kane saying today, well, he hasn't said today, but there's quotes have come out today that, it's up to him. It's up to him. And I'm afraid, Harry, it's not. Yeah. It's not remotely up to him. This is, he can stamp his feet all he wants. Unfortunately, he made a very silly mistake of signing a 6-year deal 3 years ago.
Who's doing that? It's a 6-year deal. It's
6 year. If you're Eric Bailly or whatever at Man United and you think this is the pinnacle of where you possibly could be, you run to sign that 6-year deal because you want that security. Now, Harry Kane must have known even 3 years ago that the chances were that this Spurs side weren't going to fulfil his every dream. So 6 years seems ridiculous, and it puts Daniel Levy has all the power in this. If he doesn't want to sell Harry Kane, he won't sell Harry Kane. And the only way he'll sell Harry Kane is for a phenomenal amount of money. And if somebody comes along with 150 million quid, I'm sure Daniel Levy will sell. But I'm not certain I can see anybody that will spend that kind of money at the moment for a player whose sell-on value will be nowhere near that. I think financially it would be a ridiculous deal to make at the moment. And the only club I can see doing it is Man United, because it is a cheat code to a title challenge, and I think that's key. And that they could, if bringing in Harry Kane would give them the best possible chance of challenging for the title.
I think if United spend their entire budget this summer on Harry Kane, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think they've got so many other places that need serious work. If you were the team,
if you were going to spend £150 million on transfers this summer and you still started next season with Fred and Scott McTominay in central midfield, I think you've made a massive boo-boo.
Kane, of course, improves that side, but not as it's a marginal improvement, because it's going to be a big improvement over Cavani or Martial or even Greenwood up front. But the improvements you'll get from bringing in a proper defensive midfielder or a proper centre back or both, and a Sancho, I just think there's no real debate there. The thing with Harry Kane here, Sarah, for me, is that we know him to be a very mild-mannered, very decent guy. He seems he's not the sort of person who's going to throw his toys out the pram. The comments he's come out with in that Gary Neville interview, and what we've heard over the last 4 or 5 days, this is him really kicking against Daniel Levy. This is as bad as it's going to get. He's not going to be the sort of person who goes on strike, and Levy knows that. So this is the problem. The only way Kane can really leave, I think, is either if Levy knows he can get the money, or I forgot what I was going to say. It's the only reason he can.
Is it just one reason?
Yeah, I suppose it's just that. But he's going to be a hostage. Harry Kane's going to be a hostage at Spurs. There's no other way around it.
To be fair, it's not too bad, is it, being a hostage at the club that you love? To the tune of 200 grand a week.
No,
and you're right. The problem is he hasn't got another card to play. I don't think. He can make an official transfer request, but actually making an official transfer request means absolutely nothing. It doesn't. Any talk that he's demanding a move amuses me. You can't demand a move. For all that people like to talk about player power, it's absolute nonsense. Because if you've got a contract and you have signed that contract, you are employed for the length of that contract. And you can't demand a move unless you're going to say, I'm not playing. And we have seen players before, not who have not played, but who have played in such a half-assed way that they might as well not have played. But I can't see Harry Kane doing that. Because at the moment, he's all, Spurs fans forgive him for what he said. There's no Spurs fans are saying,
that's right,
are screaming at their computer screens, or very few of them saying, what on earth are you doing?
They completely understand.
They completely understand.
Yeah.
They'd like to leave Spurs if they could. But, Harry Kane...
Let them.
Yeah, exactly. They're only for £10 million each will he allow any of those fans to leave. So they understand it. Now, will they understand it if he comes into next season and he sulks around and doesn't want to play? Because then it's the point that you are still, this club is still paying your wages, and you really should be. And I can't see him doing that. I just can't see him doing that. So I don't know where the next card is. If he'd have played this last
he's
year,
done. That's
it.
He's got nothing else to do. Yeah.
And you would think that another year, then then when you've got 2 years on your contract, then there's a little bit more of an incentive for Tottenham to sell him. But this summer, is there an incentive to sell him? I don't see that. Not unless, like you said, there's big money involved.
Yeah, but next
season, I don't see
anybody
spending that kind of money unless PSG come in. It's not ideal for Harry Kane.
Right. This is it. Okay, let's talk about the potential
leaking all over the media about wanting to stay in the Premier League, and that's obviously what he wants to do. I can't see a Premier League side is going to spend that kind of money on him. We hear about Man United, we hear about Man City. Now, Man City don't spend that kind of money. Pep Guardiola has already said it's impossible to spend that kind of money on a striker. Now, I think they're playing a little bit of a game, City. I think they're wanting to stay in the conversation in the same way that they stayed in the conversation about Harry Maguire, because that kept Harry Maguire's price right up there. And then Man United ended up spending the sort of money they probably should never have done on Harry Maguire. So I don't know whether City are playing a bit of a game here to make it seem like there's a battle on to try and get, if he's going to move, City would like him to move to United for a lot of money. And so they might just be playing their part with this. But I can't see that. I'm all on board for United buying Harry Kane for a massive amount of money, and then Man City buying Danny Ings and still being loads better. There's no doubt. Make next season massive fun if City.
Those two teams that with the additions you've just mentioned, Man City are still miles ahead. So, yeah. Because Harry Kane is not going to be able to do a lot when you've got someone like Fred just giving away 3 chances a game. It's just it's not for the good of the team. It's for the good of. Harry Kane would be the ideal Man United signing if they had all the other pieces in place. If he's the final piece of that jigsaw, but he's not, and he knows that if he goes to United, there's no guarantee of winning trophies. So why would you do it? Why be in the same position as you were at Spurs? I
guess he's got more chance, hasn't he? He's definitely got more chance at Man United than Tottenham, and I do think United, like I said, will see it as a bit of a cheat code. I think and it's a proper United sign. It's a kind of signing United would have made 15 years ago, where they see who the best player in the Premier League is and spend the money on him. And I suppose in a time when Man United fans aren't particularly happy with their owners, they may possibly wrongly and possibly naively think that that's the way to the United fans' hearts. And it will be to some, and some people will acquiesce at the idea that they're buying someone like Harry Kane. Do I think he will win them the title? No, but I think it gets them in the conversation. And I think, it might be quite important for Man United at the moment to look like a big club. I think,
Yes, I think that's fair. I think them signing Harry Kane would be an awful decision to make, and that's why it probably will happen, because that club is a little bit of a mess, certainly at boardroom level. If I'm Spurs, on the other hand, I would let him go for only for top dollar, and bring in a coach ideally who has a track record of playing and developing younger players and bringing in younger players from around Europe. So on that note, new Spurs manager, whoever it might be, we've got some odds going across the bottom of the screen there. Brendan Rodgers not mentioned in there, which is surprising, I think, because I think he'd be the sort of person, if he was able to bring one or two from the recruitment department at Leicester, that's exactly the blueprint that Spurs should be looking at, isn't it?
Oh, I'm sure he would be. I think Brendan Rodgers has made it very clear he's not for turning at the moment. I think he's absolutely right. I think right now to leave Leicester for Spurs would, especially with the Harry Kane situation, if he was umming and ahhing about it last week and thinking maybe, then there's no way he will walk into that now. I wouldn't have thought. The prospect that the best player at the club by some margin doesn't want to be there is quite something for a coach to take on. So I think he would be the ideal man for Spurs. And there's a lot of talk of Daniel Levy's tried to get him before, but he's on to a good thing at Leicester. He's got all the, they're the people's club at the moment, aren't they? They've got all this love heading in their direction. And does he, if he wants to leave for a super club or an elite club, that Spurs are not that at the moment. That's the worst possible move for him would be to go to Spurs. So I can't see that. Some of those other names are really interesting. Erik ten Hag obviously is a good one in terms of bringing the youth through. And if you're going down that path, Graham Potter, I'm really fascinated by to see how he would do at a bigger club. But then if you take Harry Kane out of it, you kind of you might end up with exactly the same situation he's had at Brighton. So I don't know about that. What
about the new name on the list there, Roberto Marintes? I assume that's a typo.
I don't know a lot about
new manager.
Roberto
I don't know who that
Marintes,
is.
But, yeah.
I
Is he
think
the
Marintes is
youth
the man
boss?
for
I don't know. Yeah.
I think he might be. I think he's the guy that can really do some serious damage in the transfer market. Okay, that's enough about Spurs. We talked about Spurs too long there. Ridiculous, really. They're not doing anything. Who cares? Let's instead talk about, we have already mentioned them in the show, but Chelsea, they play Aston Villa. Not a good time to play Aston Villa, I would say. The boy is back. Grealish is back. And crucially, not just that he's back and I'm a little bit in love with him, but this is now an important game for him because time is running out for a few players to impress Southgate and to also prove that they've got some match fitness and some sharpness. Now, I don't know where you stand on this, but with a 26-man squad, well, for me, he'd be in an 11-man squad. And the 26-man squad, this is now a chance for him to show what he can do at maybe 85% fitness against one of the best midfields in the country.
I think it was at 23, man, I must say. I think that injury did him no favours whatsoever. And I think while he was out, a few cases were made by other players. Now, they were made by someone like Jesse Lingard, but Lingard's form's dropped off since then, so we don't know where he's standing in that. There was a time 2 months ago where it looked like Lingard was absolutely nailed on, after he'd had that little spell for West Ham. You're right. Grealish on Sunday, if Grealish does something on Sunday, it would be incredibly difficult for Gareth Southgate not to pick him on Tuesday. I'm sure Southgate's already got his list, and I'm sure Grealish might well be in pencil rather than pen. I'm sure there are a couple of decisions.
Get it tattooed, Gareth.
Just like you have on your bum cheek.
Let's not get into this. Come on. You were saying something important, probably.
I think he's a name in pencil. I think if he does anything on Sunday, if he looks anything like, and we saw him in the midweek against Tottenham, he did look anything like. And I think if he does it again against Chelsea on Sunday, I think he's in that squad on Tuesday, undoubtedly. Yeah. So it is massive for him, and that's another reason why I think this is difficult for Chelsea. And I wouldn't be massively surprised if they're the ones who end up in fifth at 6 o'clock on Sunday.
A second picture there of Grealish. To me, it's a little bit depressing that we even have to. There's even a debate about whether someone like him is in. It's like having a debate about whether Foden should be in or not, or Mason Mount should be or not. I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, this is the first time in a long time where we've had a lot of creative players who can run at people, who can make things happen. I don't see any problem with putting one or two too many into the squad. Particularly, we've got that 26-man size now. So yeah, I mean, what I think doesn't matter, but come on, Grealish, for God's sake, get him in the side. We've actually got a message here from AJ. He says, actually, Super Jack is his correct title. More from AJ later in the show, I hope. Let's move on. Big week for Man City, of course. We know they've won the league already, but their centre-back, their brand new centre-back, shiny and new from Portugal, Ruben Dias, won the Football Writers Player of the Year. Deserved?
Well, more than that apostrophe, which is the wrong place. It's not just one football writer, Mark.
Yes.
Is that your apostrophe?
There is in my eyes. That's you're the only one for me, Sarah.
I said this, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had this conversation and I said Ruben Dias will and should win the Football Writers Award. I don't think he'll win the PFA award. I think that'll go to Bruno Fernandes. I think the players do tend to go for someone a little bit more populist. The City vote will be split anyway. There'll be votes going for Gundogan, there'll be votes going in for, nice. I like the apostrophe is much nicer. There'll be votes going in for Foden, Gundogan, Mahrez. A lot of them, they'll split the City vote. Yeah. But Ruben Dias timed it perfectly as well. Those performances in the Champions League, those performances against
PSG in particular,
against PSG were phenomenal. And he's had a wonderful season. I was just reading about him today, and his attitude is fantastic. He said that all the other players are kind of coming in and going, "Oh, we kept a clean sheet, isn't it brilliant?" And he's like, he's only interested if they had no shots on target. That's his bar. And he's like, he said he wanted the other side to feel powerless. Something slightly sinister about that, but
I want that from a centre back.
To have that, exactly. That's what you want, isn't it? And not only to have that "thou shalt not pass" attitude, but also to be able to pass yourself as well. It's not like he's a Neanderthal defender. He's got everything. He's really good on the ball, isn't he? And I think the test here is City didn't and wouldn't have won the Premier League without him. I think he's been the difference. Do you believe that? Oh, absolutely. If you look at them last season, look at the way they started this season. Look at that game against Leicester, where they looked like an absolute rabble. And he came in, and not only did he bring his own sort of presence and his own defensive nous and his own positioning, but he dragged the rest of them with him. He's entirely changed John Stones, who looks better than he's ever looked. And, the rest of that defence, João Cancelo is so much better than last season. It's not all to do with Ruben Dias, but I think if you have that leader and that, that real dependable presence in at centre-back, it makes the rest of the defence feel very different. And I'm saying that because I used to be that dependable centre-back and I used to make everybody feel different.
They feel sick. It's for me, it's been like a few years now of a bit of a renaissance for centre-backs being sexy again. We had Vincent Kompany, we've had Van Dijk, we had Laporte last season, now Dias. It feels like a golden age for centre-backs again. We had a little gap there between the likes of Ferdinand and Terry, and I feel like we've got some really good players in this country now.
Like you said, the Ferdinand, Terry, Vidic, Ledley King, Jamie Carragher. There was a great era, wasn't there, of centre-halves, and then there did, like you said, there did seem to be a bit of a dip. But Virgil van Dijk probably made defending sexy again, didn't he? Because we all started talking about the defenders as being the best player, which it's quite rare that you would have said that before. And so we can look at that, and it's funny the reaction to someone like Ruben Dias winning it, because the people on Twitter who kind of go mad about goals and assists and why hasn't Harry Kane won it and why hasn't Bruno Fernandes won it. But I'm a bit old-fashioned, and I think if you've been the difference between not winning it and winning it, I think that's when you should get the plaudits, to be honest. And Bruno Fernandes has scored a lot of goals in a pretty average Man United side. Harry Kane scored a lot of goals in a pretty average Tottenham side, and that's to be applauded. But I think being the guy who makes the difference between being a distant second and then being the champions, I think that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree. He'd have been my choice as well. I think you're right about the splitting of the vote when it comes to the other awards. So in that case, who do you think will take the?
I think Bruno Fernandes will. I think he'll get the Players Player of the Year, and I think don't underestimate how many footballers are actually Man United fans as well. They're not as unbiased as we like to think, and he has had a brilliant season, and he has pulled that Man United side up from a C to a B, hasn't he? Which is pretty much single-handedly, and that is to be applauded. But I think he would turn around and say, unless he wins something, it's been a poor season. And and there's so much riding on that Europa League final now. The difference now between it's this stark difference between success and failure for this season is that 90 minutes against Villarreal.
And they'll know that as well. They'll know that.
And they're going into it in rotten form. There's. You might think, they've been sort of taking their foot off the gas. I don't believe that you can take your foot off the gas before a big final like this, because how then do you get that back again?
We always talk about momentum, don't we? We always talk about momentum. Yeah, I'm obsessed
with momentum.
It's the hardest thing to regain, and you shouldn't, under any circumstance, do it. I know in that game against Leicester that they had to rest players. I completely understand that. and we both essentially defended Solskjaer for that. But
they were so
it did
poor.
It took it all out of the team.
But that only looks like a good decision if you then are better against Liverpool, and they were actually weren't better against Liverpool. They were probably worse than they were with their second string side against Leicester on the Tuesday. And then the week, this midweek game at home, and all very, it's just lackluster. It's not it's not quite there, is it? And I know they're missing Harry Maguire, big star. Now he's obviously a big difference with it when he comes back, or if he comes back for that Europa League final. I think that could decide a lot. But I don't know. I just look at that team, and you look, that central midfield is nowhere near good enough where they should be. But they should be good enough to beat Villarreal. Let's face it. We'd this is a massive, massive club who spent a lot of money playing against one of the middling clubs of the Spanish league.
It won't be straightforward, though, will it? We know it won't be straightforward. United don't do things the easy way. Let's move on. Let's talk about Liverpool Palace. A chance now for Liverpool to get that top four, which I think would constitute quite a successful season, given how it started and went on and on until this last sort of month or 6 weeks. Roy Hodgson's final game, we assume, in the Premier League ever, but who knows? Who knows? First of all, what do you make of this game? Do you think it'd be quite straightforward for Liverpool, or is this the exact sort of game Liverpool would be dreading right now?
I don't think any of it's easy, but I do think this, especially with Palace losing Eberechi Eze, I think that's a big miss for them. I watched a little bit of their game against Arsenal in midweek. This massively reliant on Christian Benteke at the moment, and they could get
on fire.
I'm a massive fan of Benteke. I think when he gets it right, he really gets it right, and he's obviously hungry at the moment. He's not got a contract at the end of the season. He's going to, bizarrely in the Belgian squad. That Belgian squad doesn't seem to have changed in about 7 years. But I don't know. I could see Palace getting an early goal, but I just can't see Liverpool not winning this game. I think they've got that momentum, and they've got everything on their side at the moment, and they're going to be at Anfield in front of fans for the first time, in a long time, and I think it's going to be pretty powerful. And the way that this Liverpool side have finished this season is, I'm going to say momentum again. It's like taking into next season, they immediately become title challengers again because of the way they've ended this season. Now, 2 months ago, we were talking about them finishing 7th or 8th, or sneaking back into the Europa League. That's what we were talking about. And now they're, to get it into their own hands now and to get in a position where they can finish 4th. And like you say, it's all about narrative, and it's all about the story arc. If this Liverpool side had been in 2nd all season and they dropped to 4th, it's a disaster. If you're 7th, 6th, 5th, and then come up to 4th, then it's a success and it's a triumph. And we'll talk about mentality monsters, and we'll talk about this means more, and we'll talk about how this Liverpool side can't be kept down, and it'll all be, that whole narrative changes, and then they go into this summer with that, the chins are back up, the chest is back out, and then
Van Dijk's back, everyone's back. They can get back into it again.
And then you start next season, you think these are title challenges again,
Absolutely.
And that's how it. It has been a fantastic turnaround. I'm not convinced by in any stretch of the imagination that something has changed. I just think these are very good players, and they went through a little bit of a blip, and there was the confidence gets knocked, and then they went again. I think massive is Fabinho back in midfield. I think that's a big thing. I think they look so much better when he's in there than being at the back. That knock-on effect of that. And maybe Jurgen Klopp will look back in a while and say, well, he shouldn't have gone for that comfort blanket of Fabinho in defence for so long, because it did seem to strangle them a little bit.
Yeah, but it takes a big call to go and play those very, very young players for the big chunk of the season.
And it's turned out that they're up to the task. It's a shame that they'll end up sort of 5th and 6th choice next season. But they've had their moment, haven't they? And it's been wonderful. But I think, I suppose the tempting thing here is the Hodgson narrative, isn't it? Of like,
this is it. This is what I want to talk about.
Liverpool fans, spit on his name, and they honestly the venom that comes out of Liverpool fans about Roy Hodgson is, well, I think it's ridiculous. And people, so many years later, it's not like he did anything horrendous. It just didn't fit. It just didn't work.
It happens all the time. It's rare you get a manager fit with a club.
Of course it does. It didn't work. This is a great manager over many years, but he has always specialised in managing, smaller clubs and
Yeah.
being all about organisation and being hard to beat and using the flair when it matters. But Liverpool wasn't the club for him. It didn't, his ambition didn't match their ambition. His philosophies didn't match their philosophies. It's fine. But put it on the owners for appointing this sort of
just
the
move on. It's
that
okay.
is put in the direction of an old man who's had a phenomenal career because he didn't quite get it right at Liverpool.
So we've got some narrative here. Then we've got some narrative here. Then so he can go back to Anfield and he can get his own back.
I'm sure he would never say that, and I'm sure he's too polite and too.
No, he would, but he'd say it in Italian or French or whatever.
Yes,
he's a classic guy, a multilingualist.
Swedish, yeah. We wouldn't have a clue what he said, but there is something tempting there, and I do think his players, if nothing else, will give everything in his last game. Whether it's enough, I don't believe it will be enough. But I think if we just have an uncomfortable first half, I think just for us, really, just for the neutrals, it'll be great. What we don't want is everybody winning comfortably at half time, so it's all over.
2 or 3-0 up. How are you going to be watching it, Sarah? Are you going to be multi-screening it? Are you going to be what are you going to do?
I just have the one telly on, and I'll trust that they're going to tell me everything, and I'll have a 6-year-old sort of jumping on my head, probably.
Oh, great! Is that your 6-year-old or just any 6-year-old?
No, I just borrow one. Just borrow.
Yeah, for every Sunday. It's the thing I do. Right, Sarah, that's all we've got time for on the show today. And in fact, this season, hopefully we'll be back with some sort of iteration of this, whether it's in the studio or remotely or whatever. I don't know.
We used to go to the pub, Mark. We used to go to the pub.
I know. We used to go to the pub and record it and have a delicious couple of pints afterwards. What was the pub called? The Albany, wasn't it, in Leeds? Well, shout out the Albany. Right, we've got to go. Thank you, Sarah Winterburn, for all of your work this year, both on the show and on the site.
We'll go with Albany. It's fine.
Oh, yeah, of course. No, the Albany's a great Portland Street in London. Very similar vibe. That's why it's the Adelphi. The Adelphi pub. Shout out, Leeds. Thanks for the season, Sarah. Thank you guys at home for watching. As I say, hopefully we'll be back with some more stuff next season. Until then, I suppose all I'll do is press this little video so you see the big weekend thing for the last time and end the broadcast. See you next season.